So as soon as we start this up, I'm probably going to warm up with like a rugby sketch again, like I normally do. It's been a while. Rugby, can I have you look up when the last Artist Arcana video came out? That'd be great, thank you. Drewid and I, the Bluest Drewid, joining me today, filming another Artist Arcana video. Welcome back, everybody. It is a format I like. I started the Discord and draw with that in mind, of just like inviting people on to draw with me. And it just kind of took this long to really figure out what the hell we were doing. Which I think is fine. Like I think
it works that way sometimes.
Yeah, a good chunk of my life has just been me kind of figuring out what I'm doing. And,
Same.
It's not a bad state to be in.
I'm starting with a hand because I guess I'm feeling really extra brave today.
I think a big thing we're going to talk about is hands. At least I am. I'm gonna try to draw a few different hands for people, maybe some feet.
Yeah. I thought it was appropriate. Besides, I need to practice.
Yep. It's one of the reasons rugby's got real funky feet. Because I struggled to draw them. So I was like, I'm just going to draw them every day. Draw them every day, and that's just going to make my art better. I don't remember who said it. A long, long time ago, somebody, if you want to be good at doing free throws, and you only do one free throw a day, you're only doing like 300 a year. So
yeah.
It's like, so if you only draw...
a lot of experience, yeah.
Only draw once a day or once a week, you don't get a lot of practice. So it's good to just try to do a lot. Rugby always like surprises me when I draw him. I get him sketched and I actually like back up and look at what I'm drawing. It's just like, oh yeah. Yeah, that's silly.
Silly is exactly what he's supposed to be.
Bionic
I love him. Rugby is great. Lots of simple shapes, relatively easy to draw, very emotive. Yeah.
So I think it's a good place to start. I don't know if you want to start or I want to start. But
it's your channel. Why don't you start?
Sure.
And I'll chime in when I have 2 cents to share.
Sure. Okay. So I'm just basically going to be staying on this left side of the screen here, so Drewid can be sketching or doing whatever you want. But for me, I think the big thing when I sit down and I'm looking at hands and talking about going from just generic hand shapes to monster shapes, there's a difference. There is a for sure difference, but there's not a lot of difference.
Defining shapes is really the first step for anything you want to draw. It's not just hands.
Yeah. So for a lot of hands, when I'm drawing hands, there's 2 trains of thought in my mind for it. And one of that is just connecting the shapes to the end of poles, basically. So like have a hand, or you have your arm shape, and then you add a hand to it. And that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is if you have like your shoulder, you can go right into drawing your hand shapes and then figuring out how to attach the arm. Like those are the 2 different ways I usually draw or start with hands. And it really depends on what you're trying to do, because if you're doing something with a lot of foreshortening, or you need to have like something connect with a sword or a badminton rabbit, right? Just something where the hands are going to be holding something and they kind of need to be connected either to each other or to an object. I will go this route first. So I won't draw the arms first. The other way around that is if you have your body, and then I usually draw my structure lines for my shoulders, I'll do something as simple as just having arm lines and then attach the hands to those. So that way I can get the placement in really fast without having to think about what the hands look like, what they're doing, how they're holding it. It's just simply blocking, right? So I think blocking is probably my first step. That's a big part for me.
Yeah. Same thing for me. My approach is a lot more painterly, which is something we've talked about a lot, so that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's kind of been around for a while. Like the way I approach it is, you'll notice like Rook has precise lines, while I kind of do big, thick brush strokes. And for me, that's useful specifically because I know if I'm looking for a line, the line I want is somewhere inside the big brush stroke. So it's in that regard, it's all about kind of narrowing down my scope of field. But it is ultimately the same. I'm just using bigger brush strokes to block out basic shapes to try to figure out what I want to do, where things are supposed to go, and what looks right.
That was great. Yeah, and I think blocking is probably the first big chunk of that, regardless of what style you're doing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and then from there, it's a lot more into structure and form. And so when you're drawing hands specifically, like you can start with something as simple as just base shapes for the blocking, but then you really need to start focusing on how those are bending, right? Because you essentially have a couple different components for a hand. You have the base palm, which is somewhere between a brick or a block of cheese. You have the wrist, and then you have the thumbs and the fingers. And I'm going to do these real choppy just so we can do it that way.
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing the blocking, really what I'm looking at is I'm looking at this shape, because this is the part of the hand that I want to focus on the most. And once you start getting that shape in there, you can start looking at how you want it to bend. You can see where it's connected to on the wrist with the connection here. There's a little bit of overlap, and these are 3D shapes, so like they're gonna have volumetric shapes to them. And that's essentially a hand. You did it. You're done. You made a sock puppet. That's all I got.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Video over. But no, like, and then from here,
draw a hand. Just draw a hand. There you go. You're done.
Draw a sock puppet. Remove the sock. That's the trick. But no, so it's like once you have the blocking in and you have this basic shape down, you kind of know where the fingers should be going, and you can now take a step back and go back to the blocking and start thinking about finger shapes. Because like, I don't focus on the detail of where the fingers go quite yet, but you could. And this goes a lot more into like what's the guy's name who I always forget? When in doubt, pinky out, right? I forget his name. It's been a long time.
I don't even know who you're talking about.
Okay, don't worry about it. I'll look that up, Ethan something, and I'll slap it in the video later. Yeah, so back to the blocking of the fingers here. So if you're doing the blocking on the fingers, you can essentially break them down into base shapes of what you want them to look like. And this is where like creating creatures is way easier if you do this kind of method. I've clumped the two middle fingers together because those rarely move separately. The two things you're going to notice, or the three things, is going to be the thumb, the forefinger, and the pinky. Like those are the real connectors, and then everything else will just kind of blend together. And what a lot of people will do with structure lines is you can now go in here and you can actually kind of start breaking apart where these fingers are and start breaking them down into different shapes and structures. And that's how you're going to be able to like really draw the fingers, because you can look at these as individual pieces, as individual knuckles, as individual things. And now you have these great volumetric shapes, and you can start getting the lines you want out of there. And that's a big thing for comic book artists, especially because even though you might sketch these volumetric shapes, you really are only interested in the outer edges, the outer lines of these when you get down to inking it. So.
Yeah, like that is specifically something that I think a lot of people miss, especially while just like starting out learning how to draw or paint or anything artistic, really, is that when we're talking about really finished pieces, and especially people who really know what they're doing, the details kind of fade in importance, and the silhouette basically will carry most of the shape language for you. So you don't need to get caught up in the details. You just need to make sure that things generally look correct.
Yeah. And so I'm going to do this one more time from a different angle here. Like, so start with a really basic shape that's connected to an arm, maybe. Basically try to figure out the overall feel I want from this. I'm going to have my forefinger, my two middles, and then a pinky. And then my thumb is kind of attached up here. Your thumb is a weird finger because it essentially has the same as the rest of your hand, but it's in a different spot. So you gotta kind of look at that and kind of figure out where your bases are, because your thumb's gonna come just barely above your knuckles, and then your other fingers are gonna come right out there. And you can get a lot of fun little details in here. Got a lot of effort. And then the more detail you need to add really only matters if the hands are important. Like if you're trying to show off the hands, you're going to have a lot more detail in them in comparison to like something holding a sword. You can get away with a whole lot of nothing. Like,
Yep. Like I just did.
Yep. Perfect example.
The fingers are hidden behind. You don't need to draw them. That's part of the
Yep.
secret. You just need basic shape to read vaguely his hand.
That's it. That's all you need. And then you can add some detail with like the knuckle marks in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's all you need. That's it. So just stop hiding your hands in your pockets and just start drawing squares. But that's how I do it. That's like a really quick rundown way of how hands get thrown onto paper. Then you can come in here and you can clean stuff up. That fingers might be a little off. Maybe that would be a little more palm and then the finger. Right? That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a lot better. So Drewid, if you want to kind of run through how you would go about it. That's a really bad angle for the hand. That is a broken arm.
I do. I focus on big brush strokes, but the blocking in is basically the same. So I start with kind of more of a pentagonal shape. And for me, the most important part in terms of my understanding of things is the wrist and where it connects to the arm. So I won't draw the hand first unless the elbow is like off the page, off the edge of the page. Yeah, I have a very much torso out approach. So if I'm drawing a pose in a character, I'll put in a lot of landmarks first. I really do draw skeleton out.
So even just like
Yeah,
having the body reference helps you kind of figure out where the hands should go, regardless of what you're doing. Okay.
absolutely. So like you'll notice while I'm drawing this in, I do a lot of. I mean, I call it a stick figure, but it really is drawing the basic shapes of the skeleton.
Yeah.
And I always make sure that I know roughly where the elbow is going to be. I make sure I know where the shoulder is going to be, and I try to put in both the two forearm bones, because it just kind of helps me with perspective. I'm a sculptor first and a painter second.
Mm-hmm.
So like foreshortening and understanding the volumes of shapes is really important. A lot of the specifics don't matter for me right now. I'm just trying to put in big shapes and see what kind of generally looks right, and then I can refine them later. So I rely on my eraser a lot. And then when I have what is ostensibly a silhouette ready, then I can go in and start trying to refine and pick out the shapes. And I've studied a lot of anatomy, so at this point, basically where I start getting into the weeds and breaking down like, well, this is where I need to keep track of these phalanges and all of the knuckle connections. It's important for me to know like where the carpals, the metacarpals, end and the phalanges start. It's important for me to know like where the webbing is on each of the fingers and kind of how that dictates the shape. And I pay a lot of attention to kind of the meaty shapes, and I have to make sure that I get the wrist well represented. I feel like the wrist is something a lot of people overlook. And it's usually, in my opinion, like if you feel like your hands are off, number one thing that I see is usually the wrist is either non-existent, you didn't put in the wrist bones, or the wrist is too long, like I've done here. The wrist is a little bit too long and kind of weirdly shaped.
Yeah, I can see the like the over tubification of the wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty common. Because like that's all it takes to fix it, right? And
Yeah.
I think part of that comes from like the bone structure of, and I'm going to draw a little sketchy sketch up here.
Yeah.
Your wrist is weird because whereas you have two bones coming together for your wrist, your hand is actually made up of, I think it's eight or nine tiny bones that then attach to your wrist fingers, like the fingers of your hand. So all of this in here is essentially like a bone cup that needs to be drawn that blends into your hand. And so depending on how it's flexed, it can be either non-existent or it can be very, very bulbous when you're drawing it. And it just kind of blends in and balances out your thumb. So I see a lot of people not think about that, and they'll just kind of stick the thumb right into the arm. Or they'll do the opposite, and they'll draw the entirety of the arm, including the wrist, and then stick the hand on top of the wrist.
Yeah.
And basically double this bone cluster.
Yes, which is basically what I did, which is why I had to shorten the wrist by half. And suddenly it looks significantly better. So
I do it all the time.
Yeah, so much. And like that is the biggest advice for anybody who's drawing everything. If you draw something and it looks wrong, so what? Like it's okay to be wrong. It only stops being okay when you're no longer willing to fix it and just say that's good enough.
I think what you were talking about right here with the hand overlapping, like, you know that it looks weird, right? Like you and I both know why it looks weird because we've done it so much and we know the anatomy.
Yes.
If you are having a problem with that, where you're drawing an arm and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna draw some fingers, and you're like, why does that look so strange? Like, go back and redraw your structure lines. Like, try to figure out what it is about these things that are not working. And then you might realize, like, oh, that bend, that's a lot of bend. Like my wrist don't do that. So then like this is going to get a little more squinched, but the arm should probably be over here. Like, you just need to move the hand, or you need to move the arm. Don't be afraid to do that. The hands are so complicated that there are many times that when you start with the structure like this and you start breaking down, or like you saying, you're adding more detail or adding more phalanges and stuff, like trying to get the real detail there, you need to stop and you need to look at the structure. Like, you need to understand how that works. Specifically, like with fingers, I see a lot of people struggle, and myself included, with bending of the fingers. The length of your fingers does not change. And I think that's something people kind of worry about, because your bone structure here for your fingers essentially kind of rolls on each other, I guess is a way to say it. So
they're all ball and socket joints.
Yeah,
the bones literally look like this.
All the meat on your hands is essentially on the inside.
Yeah. And then you have tendons on the top that kind of hold everything together.
So if you really need to figure out, why does my fingers look weird when I curl them, it's like you can look at these. These should all be the same length. Like these two need to match up. These two need to match up. That kind of thing can help out a lot. And you kind of have to think about how these things hinge on each other, I guess is a good way to look at it. But once again, that's after you do the silhouette, after you do the blocking. Because if you start with that, it can get really complicated, and all of a sudden you just have a clustered mess of fingers.
Yeah. And also, like, when you're drawing, nothing is ever actually incorrect except in reference to everything else. So if you start with the minutia, if you start drawing the details, you don't have anything to compare it to. So the next highly detailed thing you draw is going to be wrong because you don't have anything to compare it to. That's why we start with the big shapes, where we start blocking in, because starting with the big blocked shapes, you then have reference, and that's how you're able to kind of train your brain to see, in reference to this other thing, I can tell that this is wrong because it's too big, too small, it's in the wrong place, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. I think something else that's kind of interesting with your picture is occlusion. So, and what I mean by that is, like, the go-to meme is putting your hands in your pocket or putting your hands behind your character, right? So you don't have to draw them. Yeah. You can do that more subtly than that. The hand you drew right there is that one's good too. Yeah, that's a good example too. Like, there's no fingers, right?
Yeah, this one has no fingers.
Yeah, the one you drew before. It's got two
This one
fingers.
has, yeah, this one has 2 fingers.
And it looks fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that picture. So it's like the fingers are small and you're not going to see a lot. Someone asked about drawing claws, and we can maybe move into the kind of monstrous portion of this. I like to do the claw pose just whenever I have a character, because it's a little more dynamic than normal, or than just like the hands being limp.
Yeah.
But like, that's it. Like it's just 3 hooks, because most of these fingers are just going to be behind each other, and you don't really need to see them per se. And then you can come in here and you can add the 4th finger, and you can make the pinky a little more bent. But for the most part, like no one ever really stands like this. This is a very classical like comic book pose of just like splaying your fingers out. No one stands like that.
No.
Unless you're like casting a magic spell or something.
Or if you don't believe Rook that nobody stands like that, try standing like that. Strike a superhero pose, splay your fingers out, see if you can hold it for more than 60 seconds and see how much it hurts, right?
Yep. You have this big webby palm that is just a glob. And then as you kind of play with it, you can break it down even farther to like see the different pieces of the hand. You have 2 different palms. You have 4 fingers. But you can always start just by blocking in these silhouettes and these basic shapes, and then coming back in and kind of reevaluating what you need to actually show. So hands are a lot easier than people think, but they're very intimidating, and I think that's completely rational. Like they're very, very intricate. And even so, like even with what I'm doing, because I'm doing line art of them, they're always going to be a little bit of just, sausages. Like they're I'm not going to get a lot of detail in here unless I go like really big and very, very fine lines. So, and that can matter. If you're drawing a very cartoony style character, adding lots of detail to the fingers won't make a lot of sense, and it won't feel right.
Oh yeah.
So
it won't help you at all.
It won't help you at all.
It will in fact distract and take away from your finished piece.
Yep. So I think that might be the first big pro tip is, don't freak out about it. Hands are difficult, and that's okay. And it's okay to not be as detailed as you think they might need to.
Yeah, it's okay to be frustrated about it and feel like you don't know enough, and you don't. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I love anatomy, and I study it all the time, and I still don't know enough about it, right? Like, if you're frustrated by that, like, learn more, look at more stuff, look at more reference. You only get better by working on it.
All right. I think maybe this is a good point to jump forward.
Sounds good to me.
Otter hands. This is a really good example of what I want to get to with this. Paws are weird because they don't have thumbs. Like raccoons have thumbs. Bears kind of have thumbs, but the fun thing about a lot of monster claws or paws is you can start the same kind of structure. There's a lot of mammals, and even reptiles have some form of basically jointing, right?
Yeah.
So you have this, and whereas the human fingers are going to splay out into 5 individual things, otter paws not so much. They kind of do this, and then that's it.
Yeah.
These are the same hand gesture, but with different creatures. They might even have a pinky over here, but they have 5 fingers in the middle. So we're probably going to clump those 2 together. And that's my process for doing that. It's the same thing. It's just like find the blocking, find the chunks, and then make cute little otter paws. Some of the river otters do have longer dorsals instead of actual paws. So we'll do that. But because we're all mammals, our joints are pretty similar. They're pretty similar.
Well, kind of all bone joints are pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
They're all based on this kind of half of a tennis ball sort of shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, horses, same thing. Horses have stand on their fingertips, which is really creepy, and I don't like it.
Yeah,
but
yeah, like that. This is what I'm drawing here. This is basically a knuckle joint. This is this is the knuckle joint, and this is one phalange, and this is another phalange, and this is where that terminates, and underneath this toenail that is a hoof, there's the last phalange, right? Like that's how it works. But it still kind of looks and functions like a wrist.
Yep. With horses specifically, though, I think, is this the wrist or is the wrist back here? I can't remember. Horses
see.
have like
Yeah, so it's
this, and then they go
let's
like
see.
that, and then this.
Shoulder, the
and that.
elbow is up here, and then it's
Yeah. So the wrist is up here, and then he goes down to the hand.
down here.
Creepy.
And
So yeah, and we can even keep going, like for were creatures and larger bugbears and things that would have like monstrous claws. It's the exact same thing. It's the same blocking that you would do, and then you just kind of extend it out. I tend to make the thumb a little bulkier, and then maybe a little more jagged. Just lines. I'm doing a lot of contour lines here to make it seem a little more ferocious, versus up here where it's very smooth. It still has the joint bend, but it's but it's following a nice curve. Down here though, I'm doing a lot more rigid, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have the finger come up, and then I'm going to have it come out for my claws. I can do the same thing over here, and the pinky is just going to be bigger as well. But having that kind of switchback really makes the claws seem very, very sharp, because they're like coming off of the body there. And yeah, I can accentuate the joints just to make them look a little more rigid. Really pop those out, and that's essentially the same thing. Like these two things are the same picture, but this one feels more vicious, feels more it's kind of scary, to say the least, just because it's a little more angular.
And that comes down to shape language.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good way to do it.
So a lot of the shape and line choices that artists make, they make them because it's basically psychological manipulation of their viewer, right? They're trying to use shape and line and color and value and texture. They're trying to use all of the tools at their disposal to get an image or a feeling across to the people who's looking at it. So like I think there was one question where the person specifically asked, like, how do you put claws on a humanoid hand and make it not look just like weird or absurd? And the answer to that is, at that point, it's a stylistic choice, right? It depends on what bits and pieces you're pulling from your humanoid, and what bits and pieces of anatomy you're pulling from your monster, and how you're going to chimera mesh them together.
Yeah. And I think reference will be really good with that as well, because part of it is, and this is the same thing with horns, like different creatures have different types of claws, right? Like the bear claws you just drew, they're a lot thicker and they're more denser, right, than like a bird claw, which is going to kind of come out of the foot and curve more, or like a raptor claw from and so something I look at a long time, I think shape language, going back to shape language, especially like this, like the fingernails themselves don't have to make a lot of sense. When I'm doing a lot of my fantasy characters that are like nondescriptly clawed, like they just have magic powers that are giving them claws, or they're like they're not specifically a creature type. Like if I don't have a specific reference, like it's okay to just sharpen the edges. I think the specific anatomy only matters if you are trying to make like, oh, this person has bear claws. It's like, cool. Then get a reference, and then it should be a lot easier to try to figure out how to incorporate that, because you have that visual reference in front of you. And that is something I've run into a lot with a lot of young artists, because they're like, I want to add X, but I don't know exactly what that is. That's like, well, that's trouble, right?
Yeah.
So
One thing that I won't say I've always done it, but one thing that I try to do when I'm trying to parse our theoretical monster anatomy and trying to make it look or feel realistic is it is looking at a lot of reference from both things.
yeah,
And then like deciding which bits and pieces I want. The point is like how would you translate a cat's claws, and how would you make retractable claws work on a human hand? Like if you want the retractable claws, it means you have to have the switchblade phalanges, which means their fingers are going to be significantly shorter because they will basically be missing one joint in their finger. That also means that at the fingertip they're going to have the toe beans at the fingertips, and then the rest of the finger is probably going to be relatively humanoid, but they should also probably have kind of thicker palms because there will be a little bit more resistance in order to pull out the claws.
the way primate hands work is very different from
Very, very different.
feline
Yeah.
hands, and so you have to balance which parts of those have which, right? And I've seen a few
Yeah.
tabaxis that just have basically have the human arm up to the wrist, and then they just have like the big old
Kitty paws.
kitty paws, yeah.
Yeah.
And that very much feels like kind of the Lion King does that, where they can use their paws
Yeah.
like hands.
Hmm.
Because really, like, yeah, once you're at that wrist, then the cat paws are basically our hand bones are elongated to allow the cats to walk, and then our fingers are truncated.
That's basically the process if you want to come up with monster anatomy and you're chimeraing or anthropomorphizing a creature. That's kind of basically what you have to do is you have to understand both creatures that you're putting into your chimera, and then pick and choose what you want to add
Yeah.
to it.
Oh well, we went about an hour. That was about an
Well,
hour. Yeah. So
I kind of expected that to happen.
so I think that's a good little chunk for hands. And then if we want to keep doing this, if people like this, we can start doing other things.
Yeah.
Faces, heads, whatever, teeth.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it. That's
Woo.
the base model, how to draw weird hands from Rook and Drewid.
Yay.
If you have a question about how to draw specific things, or what's your theory behind different monster parts, take that however you want. Throw them in the comments, drop them down below, put them on the community posts, hit us up in chat or on the Discord, because I think these are fun little snippets that maybe they'll become shorts, maybe they'll become videos, but we'll try to figure that out, and we'll go from there. Thanks everybody for hanging out today. Drew, do you have a sign off?
Not really. I am not on social media. I despise the internet, and I'm an old man who, like, I'm millennial, but I might as well be a boomer. So
The bluest Druid. Well, thank you for drawing with me again today. I do appreciate it.
yeah, I had fun. I really enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
So I will always take this opportunity.
Yep, I think these are good. I think these are a good little thing we should probably do every now and again. So once again, hit us up with all of your questions, comments down below, and stay happy, stay healthy, keep your dice on the table. We'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.